You're listening to the Joe Camo Show. Real sports, real talk.
Beyond excited to introduce the guest, episode 16 already, Ken Shamrock. Welcome to the show, man.
Well, hey, thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Man, you've got a lot going on. It never ends with you. I mean, with the hustle and the hard work, you've started a podcast. Always keeping up with the trends. The most dangerous, what is it? The world's most the most dangerous podcast. Am I right?
Yes, that's what it is.
Man, it's a little surreal, you know, sitting here with you because, again, I don't really get starstruck. I do fantasy football. By the way, do you play fantasy football? I heard you play fantasy football.
I do, man. And in fact, I hope we can get into that a little bit because my season started out like a train wreck, but I squeaked into the playoffs.
Did you? Okay. A lot of people had a hard time this past week with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's a long story. We won't get too much into that.
Right.
But it's a little surreal to me. Again, I don't get starstruck because I had David Johnson endorse my brand. I met Martavis Bryant. I've had CJ2K on this show. I don't really get starstruck. And I'm not so necessarily starstruck, but it feels surreal to me because you're a household name. You're a guy I grew up watching. I kind of aspired because I was in the martial arts as a young kid, took Taekwondo. I'm born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario. I trained with some really tough guys, some really tough instructors back in the day. A guy by the name of, I don't know if you know him, but he was well known in Toronto, Hamilton area, John Savitas. He was a kickboxing champion in the 90s. Does that ring a bell at all or no?
Yeah, he wasn't much into MMA, but he could knock people out.
Yeah, John, he was intense. He'd come in there and it was like martial arts training was intense. They put me on the chair, they do the splits. It was like hard training and it was extreme mental toughness. And it was back when, my dad would get me into baseball and it was like, you lost. It wasn't like, everybody, no, but there's no losers now. It was tough mentality. And that's what I grew up with. And that is what my audience gravitates to. They love the lion mentality. I go with them. Just kind of giving you some background on me. I go with the whole lion mentality, and what a better fit, to have on this show is one of the biggest lions on the planet, human lions, that is you. And, again, big introduction here, but there's a lot of energy going in this show. I'm excited.
Well, hey, I appreciate you having me on and I'm glad you broke it down because it makes it a little bit more comfortable because sometimes you get on with some people and you're talking with them and they have a little bit more of a viewpoint. And so when you're doing these talks, you obviously you're there for the fans, not for the guy hosting you or you being on there trying to outshine anybody.
Right.
So you try to stay in the middle somewhere so you don't get into a conflict, right? Because everybody has their own opinion and in today's world that we live in, especially someone like myself, I have to be very careful on what I say or do with somebody when it comes to my opinions or beliefs. And so a lot of times I get on, I hear somebody start to say something, and these little trigger things that I pick up that they say, which will kind of have me understand where they sit. And therefore, I'm able to have a great interview with them in order to stay away from those type of topics. And in this case, I think you and me can dive in and be very comfortable.
Yeah, I have no limits. Honestly, I'm basically fearless. And we didn't plan this. We didn't plan this. We're both wearing lion shirts. I didn't plan this at all, but I kind of created this logo around a football and the lion, and that's what I do. And Ken, I got to tell you, the reason I do what I do is I don't like talking about myself, but I have to tell you about myself. We've never talked before, so you have no idea who I am. We all know who you are, which we're going to get into a little bit more about what you're doing now. But my whole thing with my fan base, I want the lion mentality. And the problem with the mainstream sheep, I call them the Kinsheepsis. Have you heard of that term yet, Ken? The Kinsheepsis?
No, I haven't.
Well, you play fantasy, right? So the same rankings, the guys that finished on top last year, the mainstream white collar analysts say, draft these guys in the exact same order. The magazine. Yeah, seriously, the magazines come out, all this crap comes out. Well, I already knew that CMC was going to decline. He had a pinnacle year last year, Christian McCaffrey. We knew that. And my whole mentality is straying away from the consensus. So I can't compare myself to you, but what you did for the fighting game initially is what I'm doing for the fantasy football game. And we're talking a $7 billion industry, 60 million plus people play fantasy. And I've taken a stranglehold of this industry and changing the way advice is given. So again, it's just lion mentality all around on this episode, Ken. I'm telling you.
Well, just to let you know, I got the first pick in the draft, and guess who I selected?
CMC?
Yeah, I did. Which the way I drafted in this year, and I won't get too long into it, was I drafted more for 4 to 5 weeks into the season because I drafted guys like CD Lamb, the other kid that plays for the Denver Broncos that came out with him.
Cortland Sutton or
no, the rookie Judy. So I just CD Lamb, Judy, the kid for Detroit, the rookie. He didn't play this week.
Swift.
I drafted him. So I drafted a couple of these rookie guys after I got my main roster. Like I got McCaffrey, Godwin, Thielen, Cooper Kupp, which I later traded for Juju. And so I knew it was this process to be able to get into the playoffs. And it would be, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks before it started to mold together. Well, what happened was I ended up losing McCaffrey. I ended up losing Godwin for a few weeks. I lost Thielen for a while with all kinds of different things that happened with him. And it just felt like everything. So then I started going to the waiver wires and I picked up guys like David Montgomery, Antonio Gibson, Deebo Samuels, believe it or not. Corey Davis, I just picked up last week.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you and I both know that, and at least in my experience, when you draft, your roster is not going to look anything like it when you get to the end of the season. You have to be able to adapt and adjust on the fly because things are going to constantly happen. You're going to have a guy that's hot. And if you can get 2 or 3 players out of a guy that's hot,
right,
and you can fill 3 or 4 positions or 2 or 3 positions with that one guy that's going to give you somewhere around the same amount of points consistently, you would much rather do that because your chances of losing all 3 as opposed to 1 is much higher losing 1 than 3.
Yeah, you got to have depth. And I don't blame you for taking CMC, first of all. I took Saquon, and I had half the problem solved, and then I tried to cover myself, and even Saquon went down. It's been a crazy year, especially with the vid. I call it the vid, so it doesn't ruin the algorithm on the YouTube stuff, and they say, oh, this video is talking about the vid. But it's been a crazy year all around. But, yeah, I'll have to get you into my 16-round draft solution next year. I'll give it to you for free. Like I scouted out guys like Jefferson, Claypool. You got to look at the depth chart and see who's emerging, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing too, and that's why I like doing these things like this because right now I play in a league with my kids. It's called the World's Most Dangerous League. So we play with a bunch of his friends, but I'm starting to, now that I've been in it about 5 years now, kind of getting that rhythm. This year was really good for me because I was able to adapt and adjust with a lot of different things with COVID and injury and different things. And now McCaffrey, hope maybe if they bring him out, they may store him away until next year, but we won't know that until this week when they start playing again, or next week when they start playing again. If he does come out, I've got a really good shot at winning the tournament. But like I said, it's whether or not they're going to let him they're going to roll him out and let him play these last couple games, even though they're not in playoff contention.
Yeah, I'm in a celebrity league right now, too, with a guy from Fuller House, John Brotherton. There's a couple other guys, the guy from Station 19, the guy that plays Superman in DC. There's a bunch of celebrities in this league, and I didn't do too good in this league. I'm kind of mid-pack right now. I got hit with some injuries. But yeah, fantasy's been a crazy, it's crazy every year, but this year it seemed a little bit worse,
Well, because you had this COVID thing,
right.
What I call the Kung Flu virus, where it's the sickness has turned into a death now. So everything is treated like they're going to shut everything down if somebody gets the flu. And I understand it because it'll spread. So I get the reason why. But I don't get the reason of the panic. I get the reason why they're doing the precautions and the cleaning. I'm with all of that, but I'm not with the panic part of it, which to me is just crazy. I think you got to do what you got to do, keep things under control, lay in your things, but don't make people afraid. Don't make people fear something that's not there. And with all that stuff going on in the NFL, all those precautions and everything, and people getting sick or testing positive, and then coming back being negative, however that works. You're positive and then you're coming up negative. So however that works, but you imagine how hard it was. And it was being able to keep your roster together
right
all year long with just injuries, right? Or people fading out and other guys moving, rookies moving in, and you're adjusting on the fly. And now you throw that in there. It was like musical chairs, man.
You brought up the COVID talk, and I'm all about. I have this guy coming on, I think tomorrow, Ian Smith. He's a gym owner out in New Jersey. He is opposing closing down, and I think he's getting fined. But he's doing a whole movement towards opening gyms. Because what I don't understand, and I think it's fucking bullshit, is that you got Costco open, and you got these guys, these restaurants down the street that are only limited in this area 10 per sitting. It's just been absolutely insane. And now the big talk is this vaccine bullshit, where you can't fly without a vaccine. I've been trying to do my research. I'm not a doctor, but I'm trying to do my research. There's no way in hell am I getting pricked by a knife. And I'm just gonna be straight up with you. You don't have to share your opinion, but this is just me. There's no way in fucking hell I'm getting pricked by a knife, where we don't know the long-term effects. And I got 2 young children. I got a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. If I got to homeschool these children, I'm going to homeschool these children. If I can't fly, I'm going to earn as an entrepreneur enough money to buy my own damn jet. I'm just not going to do it. I will not. And I refuse to take a vaccine. That's just me personally.
Well, first of all, think about it like this. You're supposed to live in a world of freedom and a world of freedom of choice.
Correct.
That's what our Constitution is about, is for us to put people in these different places to work for us, to be able to do things to make our lives better.
Right.
Not that we put these people in place to be able to tell us what to do, to take away our rights, to be able to have freedom of speech. That's not what they get paid for, because that's what we're doing. We're paying them. And
Right.
we're paying them to treat us like slaves. Literally, these people that are fighting and screaming and yelling about slavery, and yet we're turning around and allowing them to do exactly the same thing that we're all fighting against, or at least trying to fight against with each other.
Right.
And we're turning around and allowing these politicians to put us back into that same box, which is slavery. We're all being put in a box so that we have to answer to the government, and not for the government to answer to us.
Right. And that's one thing I hate. Like, that's why I went to entrepreneur. So I was actually a hydraulic sales technician, a sales guy. I hated working for people. If I had an opinion, I couldn't state it. I felt like I was conforming. I didn't want to be confined to working for anybody. I branched out into this brand. Now I've monetized it to a salary where I can live off it, pretty well. And now we've got this other form of control now, where they're telling us, you got to do this, you got to do that. Now, from what I understand, in Canada, it's not mandatory to take the vaccine, but from what I understand is they're going to restrict you from doing certain things, which is, I think, bullshit. Right. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of people.
Extortion. That's called extortion. It's called extortion.
It's terrible. And it just kind of stay on the same kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent, but I want to talk about mentality, right? Because again, I was young, so I don't really know, like 80s, 90s, I grew up in the 80s, born in early 80s, but the mentality seemed a little bit tougher. For example, in the schoolyard, if we want to duke it out, we could fight, right? Now and again, I understand why some things are in place. It doesn't make sense to go punch people in the face anymore, and I get it, right? It's a little more civilized to some degree, but things were just handled in a little bit, like we weren't afraid to do things as much.
But it's different, brother. It's different when you're talking about when you go back there and you're fighting and 2 guys meet behind the gym. Right. That's a whole different ballgame than some kid walking up to a kid that doesn't want to fight and punches him.
Correct.
That's a different thing, right? What we're talking about is just people having a disagreement, kids, and they start fighting with one another. Now, today, if somebody gets beat up, like the one kid that ends up winning is now a bully, even though both these kids went at each other, but the one that loses is going to get a pity patty party instead of saying, okay, hey, better luck next time. What's your beef? Is it over? Are you done? As opposed to, now we're going to empower the kid that got beat up to be able to disgrace the kid that won, even though both of you had a disagreement and you went at one another and one of you won and one of you lost. But the one that lost is the one that's going to get the credit and the power to be able to put the other kid down and his family and everything around them. To me, that's what's happening in our world, is that, like you said in the earlier, is like they want everybody to if let's just say we all start out down here, right?
Right.
And depending on your circumstances, whether I'm in a good family, a strong family, and you're not in a really good family, and that it takes you longer to get from point A to point C. So say it takes you and you're at point B and you're still working, and this guy got there quicker because he's privileged. He happened to be in a home where his parents were together, and that now is a bad thing. Like, okay, being privileged and having things that you were built in, which was a family and a strong foundation, and you were able to rise to the top a lot faster. Now what they're saying is the kid that didn't, and I was that kid that was down here that didn't have all the good things.
Right.
That now we're going to go ahead and start you up with these guys. We're not going to put you in a position where you have to work through all those transitions and processes to get here. No. When you're an adult and you walk into a job, you're going to have the same opportunities as somebody that went to a 4-year college or a 6-year college, got a degree. And now we're going to be forced to put these other people who haven't done what you've done to get there at the same position for no other reason than we just want to try to make everybody feel good.
Right. And you know what, Rocky said it best. And I know it's kind of a movie and stuff, life hit hard. Nothing's going to hit hard as life. Right. And to me, and again, we always kind of had humble beginnings. We had just enough money to get by. We never thrived. My dad immigrated here from the Middle East. Right. And we came to Canada. I was born in Canada. And it's like, we always kind of struggled. He was a steel worker. It was always tough. The last thing he said to me is like, Joe, can I have $10? Right. He didn't have $10. And the day after, he was mowing the lawn and he passed away, heart attack. So, it was very humble beginnings. It's very hard to talk about, but it took something like that to move me to really take the courage to have that line mentality. Life's got to kind of hit you and it makes you a stronger person. Right. But for a guy like you, right, you've hit such high pinnacles, right? You're well known. You've hit the pinnacle of sport of mixed martial arts. Does life get easier once it's been so hard for you? Does it get do other things in life become a little easier for you, or is it always kind of hard?
Well, and I think you see a lot of this within the sports world, in the entertainment world, is that when you start out at that level where you don't have a good foundation, a good family foundation, so maybe you do have a good family foundation.
I do. Yes.
You don't have any money, like you're poor, and so you struggle to kind of get to where all these other kids that have this money and they have connections and they're able to get their kids in the right schools and the right sporting programs and the right training and the right education. And over here you got like where I came from, where everything you do, it's a struggle. Like you're just trying to get there is a struggle. And so when you get to these positions and you're all trying to work for the same spot, this is what happens with all these guys. They gravitate towards sports, or some people may gravitate towards acting, and they're good at it, right? And all of a sudden they gravitate and they get all of this fame, all this power and money when they came from this side over here where they didn't have money. They didn't have all those things they wanted. They buy their mama a house. They buy their brand new car and a gold chain and a watch and a fancy car. And they do all these things because they never had it before. And all of a sudden through sports or through acting or whatever it is, now all of a sudden they have power, they have money, they have girls, they have everything given to them.
Right.
And you can't control it. It eats you up. Pretty soon you look behind me, your career's over, your money's gone, and nobody's there. It's gone. And this is what happens, as opposed to somebody who comes from that foundation. They've had money. It's not like they were dying to be in this position so that they can feel what it was like to be privileged.
Right. So
when you get there, sometimes, and majority of the time, you don't know how to deal with it. Yeah, it's like because people that are used to that kind of lifestyle, used to having money, not having to strive and get things, as opposed to these athletes like myself and people that get to a point where they're successful and they come from that kind of background. They buy everybody money. They buy them a house, mama a house, they buy the cousins. Everybody's part of this because they're all coming from that area, right? So, and when it's all said and done, at the end of it, they end up broke and they've got no money left because they didn't know how it all worked, how that all business worked, how money would just flow through your fingers, as opposed to people that come from that kind of background and they understand it. They've been taught going up. And so this is a thing that bothers me when we get to this point and we want to try to change things so that people all feel like they've got this starting from this place, and when they get there, how to keep it. That's where I think we fall so short when it comes to the world and trying to make everybody equal. That, well, let's start with trying to help these guys understand when they finally get there, like myself, how money works, right. how it doesn't last if you don't invest it, or if you don't save it, and if you don't start trying to pinch it, it goes quick. And so for me, when I look at it, you ask that question, about where it all starts and how you get there. I got there the hard way and I blew it. I blew it all. And I blew it all by the same things with it. I had trying to take care of family, trying to take care of this, trying to take care of fighters. And everybody is grabbing from you when you feel like the king. And so you're always helping because it makes you feel powerful. But then when it's all gone, all those people are gone. And so that's something I think is a hard lesson that has to be learned. It should be learned before you lose it all.
I got to ask you, because you've hit the pinnacle of, I would say, fame and all that. You've kind of hit the, the pinnacle. That's the only way to say this, right? A lot of people dream to be where you are. I kind of dream to be where you are in the sense that I don't really need to be like famous, but I really want to be completely financially abundant. And I want to basically think of Joe Rogan for sports. That's what I'm building to. And I know I can do that. I've 4 years in this and I've really, cornered this fantasy market. I'm big on social media with fantasy. That's just one market. I want to branch it. That's why I did the Joe Camo show to add to it. But how does it feel? Could you explain? You're in, let's say, it's 1999. Everybody knows your name. You're in the WWE. You've done the WC, the UFC. You've won your championships. You're the alpha male. You look good. You feel good. You've got some money coming. How does it feel to be in that position? Can you kind of explain it?
Yeah, well, and I just tried to put myself back in that situation of when I'd actually walked into my hotel room and Sammy Saranaka, who was the promoter for Japan, it was my second time over there. And I remembered I went back to my room and this was after I had already fought twice. I did really well. Sammy comes into my room. And of course, to me, like I said, just think about where I came from, right? I didn't have a whole lot of money or anything like that. He walks into my room with 3 stacks of $10,000 bills, which is 30 grand in cash.
Right.
And he puts it on my bed and he says, "Welcome to the team." And I'm like, that's mine? And I literally felt like I was a billionaire. And so I signed a contract for a year for 30 grand.
Right.
That money was gone in 6 months. I signed a contract for a year. That was my first experience of understanding, like when you get money up front, when you get paid like a prize fighter,
right?
The money comes in, the taxes go out, your training goes out, and then you buy something for yourself and there's probably nothing left. And that was my first experience of understanding. When I went in, I felt power. Like, wow, I'm good. I'm good at this. I knew this is what I was going to do. I just knew it. I just felt like it was natural for me. And I felt powerful. But at the same time, as you're going through this process, that power also leads to stupidity. Right. Because it's hard to balance it when you've never had to really understand it or even been around it. And so how do you balance something you don't understand? So like you said, when I felt what it feel like being in that position, it felt like I was invincible. It felt like I was powerful. And you don't really get the understanding until you start going through a few scenarios. One was the 30 grand, right? I thought, wow, but it ain't a lot of money, man. It wasn't a lot of money. No. And so, but I didn't realize that, right? And then when I did realize that, and then I started, being a little bit more conscious about my contract and what I was signing for, what it meant each month, what was coming out of it. So I did that early on. I started learning that early on because I was managing myself pretty much. And so I started doing all that. But at the same time, then I was also winning fights. So I won over in Japan, the tournament. Then I came over to UFC and I started winning over here. I lost at first, made a commitment, said, I'm not fighting in Japan. I'm going to focus on this. And then all of a sudden I moved to the top of that. And so succeeding in all those things, for me, it was more, and again, I think that being in it, I think you have to almost put yourself there, but it was almost like there was nothing else mattered. Right. Like not my family, not going out in the afternoon, in the evening and going out with my friends. I mean, obviously I did that later on. My book says that, or one of the books say that pretty much. But when I first started out, man, there was nothing that distracted me from the goal that I had set for myself. And that was, I wanted to be the best. And so therefore, when I was so focused that I didn't allow anything to get in the way of what was going to get me where I need to be. And that was on training. And that was like multiple, like weight training, kickboxing, grappling, conditioning, diet. I mean, all these things it was all day long. And it was just a focus thing that I had. And then when I finally got to that spot where I felt like, okay, I did it in Japan. I was on top. And then I felt like, okay, I am, as they had ranked me, the #1 fighter in the world by Black Belt Magazine. It's the #1 fighter in the world.
What year was that? What year was that?
I want to say 94, but I'm not sure. But somewhere in there, 93, 94, 95, somewhere in there. And I was it. And at that time, I think, and that's where you'll see a lot of times I made some mistakes, thinking that I was above what I was, and then fighting through injuries, thinking that injuries couldn't stop me. And so there's a lot of that other stuff that goes along with being confident enough to be able to do what I did. But there's also things that are hard to balance by being that confident, because there's things that you definitely overlook or that you don't look at as a normal human being, and even be more compassionate about certain things. You're just focused on what you're doing, what you did, and what you want other people to do.
Is there anything you would have done differently? I mean, there's probably a ton of things you may have done differently in life. Some people look back, but is there any regrets in that time when you were in your peak, let's say 94 to 2004 type thing? Is there anything you would have done differently? I mean, overall, whether it be fighting, nutrition, relationships, is there anything that we would go back and say, you know, I had it all. It looked like I had it all, whatever it may be. I was the alpha. My name was out there, but I would have just liked to maybe change that.
Yeah, I don't like to do that too much, but there's, if I was going to look at one thing, because I had fun, there's no question. And yeah, I could go back and say, I would rather do more of that, less of that, more of that. But what I would say, if I was going to pick one thing out of all of it,
yeah,
it would have been for me to be able, because it made a huge difference in my comeback now with my health and everything, is I would have liked to have taken a year off.
Yeah.
Just taken a year off, got my knee fixed, got my shoulder fixed, rested my body, and come back, because I believe that would have added years on to the end of my career. I never, from the time I stepped into the Japanese ring in pro wrestling and fighting, which was in 89.
Yeah.
And then of course, 90 over in Japan, and then 93 in the UFC and on. From that point on till let's say I was 2016. I had never taken a break. Imagine that. 89 to 2016, I never stepped away from training. Never.
That's insane. You still look good now. How many days a week are you working out now?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it varies, because right now, because of my body and because of my age, rest is the most valuable thing I can have, nutrition and rest. So when I go to work out and I work out hard, yeah, I'll take 2 to 3 days in between my next workout.
Right. I was looking at the fight. I think you fought Gracie again in 2016, right?
Yeah, I get this all blur, but yeah, something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I just felt like you didn't throw as much as you could have. Did you feel you held back in that fight, or did you give it your all in 2016?
No, we had a plan. That was just like every time I went in with Hoist. There's no question. Obviously the first time I was way outmatched with skill sets, which I didn't realize until it was too late. Second time I planned for a specific fight, and then they put a time limit in there, which they didn't tell me until night before the fight. And I thought our game plan worked to a T, exactly what we wanted it to do. We turned their strategy. I turned it around on them. I basically was patient. I waited on them, waited for them to make the mistakes, sat in his guard, in his wheelhouse, where they're supposed to be the most dangerous, and challenged him to try to submit me so that he would open up and I would be able to hit him. And he did the same thing I did. He didn't want to make a mistake. So I know they put the blame on me for not fighting, but I could say the same thing, as I sat in your wheelhouse where you are the most dangerous, and I challenged you to submit me, and you didn't. So, and you had 20 years over me.
And you didn't know. A lot of people, the world didn't know. You could look back and say, oh, that's easy, Ken. You could have easily passed. Oh, that's just past the guard. Like, you don't even know what the guard was. It was
It's like, yeah, we didn't know.
There was a guy, I was like, I don't know, it was like the mid-90s. I was in my early teens or whatever. And there was a guy that came out, was like, hey, there's this thing called Gracie JiuJitsu, and you got to hip escape out of here, and you got to get your arm in there and get out of the guard. And I'm like, what is this stuff? And you arch your hips, and you know, you get out of it. But it was like so weird. But like whenever you think back, you were one of the guys that kind of got introduced to this like hands-on. So was it like kind of like, you must have heard of it in the like before, right? Or was it like completely new? Like what is this shit when you're, was it like what is this shit when you're in it, or did you have an idea of this going into the fights?
Yeah, I had no idea, because when I found out about it, I was over in Japan, and I was champion.
Yeah.
And then when I saw a video of it, which Funaki actually showed it to me in the dojo down there, because I told him I was going to fight in this thing, and I didn't really believe it was going to happen, but I signed up for it. And if it does, I'm going to be prepared for it. I need you guys to come down with me, work my corner. And so he looked up. Luckily, he did, because he looked up some stuff and kind of showed a little bit what they did. But when I looked at it, it didn't look like that's what everybody fell into, right? It didn't look like they were fighting. Like, well, that's not going to do anything. And
no,
of course, then when I got in there and realized that, you know, it didn't matter how weak he was, because he took away my strength from the gi. He literally used the gi to eliminate my strength.
Leverage.
Wrapping it around my neck. There's no way I could pull an arm off. There's no way he chokes me without, you know, the gi. You know, if it's just bareback, there's no way he's going to do that. It's not going to happen. And so, but when the gi got on there, which is something I didn't understand, I went into thinking I was going to just dominate. There's nothing he could do to me. And of course, I got woke up to like, wait a minute, because I was told I couldn't wear my shoes because it was a weapon. And here I was being choked by this rope. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, split second, like, wait a minute, my shoes are a weapon and this is not.
Like, I'm not on your side. I would say the same thing for him, if he was here. But if I took a gi in right now, that's kind of like cheating. You're using a weapon to choke somebody. You don't have that in the UFC now.
Well, and especially if they say there's no rules, that anything goes. And then you get there and they tell you, like Art Jemerson and Zane Frazier and these guys, that they couldn't tape their hands. These guys are strikers. Like they make money with these. Yeah. Therefore, they have to tape them to protect them. And now they're saying you can't wrap your hands. And there's supposed to be no rules. Anything goes. That's what they said. And then they tell me, they pull me aside and say you can't wear your shoes. Right. I've never not worn shoes before. Like, I'm like, okay. Like, I didn't realize how bad it would be for me to go in there without shoes on. I didn't understand the surface enough to understand how slippery it would be for me to go in there and actually fight without these shoes. So there was a lot of stuff that like that happened, and we all agreed to fight anyways, you know, so it didn't matter, win, lose, draw, whatever. We stepped in there, we fought, we lost, period. But I think it's really, really only fair that people understand what all those guys had to go through when we walked into this thing. We were all blinded by rules, which were not supposed to be any rules.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it was, but like with the sumo wrestler getting his teeth knocked out, everyone remembers the guy with the one boxing glove. We all kind of remember that. And the way that the brain works, I've been reading a book on how the brain works. You kind of remember things, you know, the first thing that happens and the last thing. So if I'm thinking fighters, I kind of remember the most recent. I mean, there's this guys in the middle, you know, like the Chuck Liddells, the guys in there, like Forrest Griffin. We remember them, the guys that really stand out. But now I find that I still watch UFC and it's entertaining. I got Jamal Hill, who just had a knockout at light heavy. He's coming on the show. I know him. Benil Dariush, he's a top 11 lightweight. All these guys, he was just on the show. But I don't know. I just find that you kind of remember the guys at the beginning. You're going to be always remembered as the guy, you know, that started the UFC. And then kind of people remember the guy, you know, recency bias. There isn't so much. The middle guys are kind of, I don't want to say forgotten, but they're just not as memorable. That's why it's so iconic for you. You're in such a good position. Like, you're going to be remembered forever as the guy that started. But I want to just say something as well here is like, I think, and I like the structure now, the 5-minute rounds are great. I get you have to have structure, but if let's just say, and I did a little bit of light MMA amateur stuff, but if I said, hey, I'm the toughest fighter on the planet, shouldn't you be able, and it's a little crazy, but shouldn't I say, if I want to be the toughest man on the planet, I should be able to fight a guy at 260 if I'm 150, or is that kind of insane to think that right now?
No, obviously I think that if the weight is 100 pounds different, I get it, right? That, you know, there's too much knowledge now, but I think if you're talking between 20 and 30 pounds, I mean, especially since I fought with no rules or anything, so maybe I'm a little bit more biased, but I still think that you're within that realm of you having to be able to deal with that with your toughness and your skill set. I think 20, 30 pounds, maybe 40 on the outside, you should be able to still be able to go with whoever it is if you're the best. Yeah.
let's say, I mean, I think male, female, I mean, I don't know if you want to mix that. That's kind of getting on another level, but let's just say I'm a man. I want to be the strongest man on the planet. Give me the 260. I might get slaughtered, and I get it, but I want to be known as the toughest guy, not the toughest guy at 170, not the toughest guy at 155. I want to be the toughest guy, and I should be able to have an opportunity to do that. Don't you think? I don't know.
See, that's where I think that key word is, the opportunity.
Right.
I think if you think that you're that good, like a Conor McGregor,
right,
and he wants to fight a light heavyweight, he should have that right.
Why not?
He's good enough to where you got to, I don't know why, and I guess it's the world we live in, that all of a sudden when someone starts talking like that, they think they got to protect them. Like they may get broke.
Right.
Like it's like a China glass. These are fighters. It's like you think a big heavyweight's going to get a clean shot on a guy at 170 pounds? Reason why he's so good is because you can't catch him. You're not going to be able to land a solid shot on him. And if you do, yeah, you may knock him out, but he's a fighter. He'll recover. So I don't get it either. I'm
a man. You're a man. I got two hands. You got two hands. Let's go. You know, that's why I enjoyed the UFC originally. It was so fascinating. Oh, this guy's going to get that. Let him go. Let's see what happens, you know? And
well, my friend Pat Miletich, I was always intrigued with him too, because he fought Dan Severn. Dan Severn was a heavyweight. He went in and fought him because he said, I want to challenge myself. They went to a draw. But in my opinion, I think Pat handled himself, and I think he looked great doing it. So I don't think it's any different than today, because the skill sets are still good enough, and I think the fighters are still good enough to where if a guy that wants to go, hey, listen, I'm beating everybody in my weight, like Conor McGregor, he was dominating everybody, like there was no competition, and he goes, I want to fight that guy. Why wouldn't you let him? I don't understand that. If he wants to say, I think I can beat him, let him have it.
That's it. So I know we're kind of tighter for time today, but so I want to just get through some questions here. I really wanted answered. Best fighter you fought? I would say like the biggest challenge, the guy when you went up against him, like, oh shit, this guy actually moves better than I thought. Aside from Royce Gracie, because that's not really fair. Nobody knew about jiu-jitsu. Anyone would have you could have been Superman and probably got caught in a triangle there, armbar. But is there another fighter that, like, man, that guy was tougher than I thought?
Well, I would probably say and it's not tougher. I think just because I learned so much from him, and I think that was Funaki, Masakatsu Funaki in Japan. I remember just learning everything. I was a tough kid when I came out, and be able to learn from him was just phenomenal. The guy had a lot of skill sets. The one thing with him that I would say that his weakness is that he wasn't that guy. Although in the gym, I'd put him against anybody. I mean, I'm serious. He was that good. But whenever he got out in front of the crowd and the people and the pressure was on, he never fought up to his ability. Funaki, people really knew how he fought in the gym because I was with him. I trained with him. I know.
Right.
And then see what he did in the ring. You wouldn't know it was the same guy. He just didn't put that kind of intensity and effort while he was training that he would in the ring. And I think a lot of it had to do with because of the pressure and going in front of crowds.
Okay, another question here. This is a tough one. And again, we won't hold you to it. This might change next week. I don't want to hold you to this, but who is the greatest, not Ken Shamrock, who is the second greatest MMA fighter of all time? There's talk about George St. Pierre, fellow Canadian of mine. There's Habib now, right? There's Bones Jones, but then there's some controversy around him. Who is the best fighter? Anderson Silva. Who do you think, in your opinion, is the best, the GOAT right now, the way it sits?
And I'm biased because I saw him, and because of the time that we did it, there wasn't as many, I guess, rules and skill sets. But I would say just the beast mentality was Fedor Emelianenko.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Yes.
Yeah, I think that pound for pound, the way he moved, his striking ability, I would put him at the top.
Okay, yeah. I had my old trainer, Lee Turner, who also trained with John Savitas. He was a martial artist with me, one of my old mentors. He was on episode 1. I had to start off with him because he was my roots, and he said Fedor as well. So, yeah, man, you can't argue that. What was I going to say here? I lost my train of thought. okay, Tyson versus who was it? Jones there. What did you think of that fight? I'm really curious. Mike Tyson, you got to say that was pretty impressive to come in, get yourself in that shape. And it seems like he's doing it to kind of role model and be like an example to people. What are your thoughts on that fight and these type of fights of these guys that, you know, obviously past their prime coming back and fighting? What's your thoughts on it? I'm just curious.
I love it. I think that people have to understand what kind of breed we are. Like,
Right.
this is what makes us live and make our hearts beat, makes us happy. And I fought through that when I was in MMA. People saying bad things about me, that I washed up, that you're old, that you're never relevant, you know, all these mean things that these fans would say because I wanted to get in the ring and compete. That's all I look at it from 30,000 feet up. I wanted to get in the ring and fight. I wanted to compete. That's all it is. And yet you have these people who never stepped in the ring before, who've never fought before, that were fans of this, and that are screaming and yelling at you because you're fighting past your prime.
Right.
And you're like, hey, let me explain why I'm doing this. It's because when I get up in the morning, it makes me feel alive. I can go train. I feel like I've got an agenda. It's something I've done my whole life, and I feel good doing it. I'm not as good as I used to be. I know that. But can I still get in there and compete at a decent level? Yes. Do fans still want to see me fight? Majority of them? Yes. So therefore, if I'm going to go out there and say, if I had to go do something that I enjoyed doing after I was done retired, I wanted to retire and be done with it, what would I do? I would say fighting. Let me go in and fight, whether it's fighting guys that are lower class or helping on a card somewhere or another, where I fight in the middle somewhere, where I fight somebody that's up and coming. Any of those things where I could still compete and not have people look down on me, because I don't want to go fishing. I don't want to go drinking beer on the weekend. I don't want to go boating or sailing or go on vacations. These are not things that make me happy. This is what makes me happy. And so now you're telling me, all of you, some of you fans are now telling me that I shouldn't go do what I love doing and make money doing it more than I would make anything else in retirement. I could go out and have fun doing something I love doing and get paid for it. And you're saying that I don't deserve that, or like I shouldn't be doing that. I don't understand that. So this is what Tyson's doing. Mike Tyson's doing what makes him feel good. And he's doing it in front of fans because he loves entertaining fans. And so the majority of the fans are happy to see this. But then there's some of them out there that just got nothing but bad things to say because they're not very successful, because they're not very happy. And all I say is this: leave it alone. Let the people that want to watch it, watch it. Those of you that don't want to watch it, don't watch it. But don't say anything negative about it, because it doesn't evolve you. And so let these people go do what they love doing. I love doing it. I know Mike loves doing it. I know I had a conversation with him. And that I maybe even spearheaded that thought in his head, because I gave him some advice on how to make his body healthier, and put him in that position to feel good enough to go fight and feel good about himself. So for that, I just say, let it be, man. Let it be. Let people enjoy it. If you don't, go do something else.
But you know, more than anyone else, you're always going to have haters, and I'm nowhere to the level of you in regards to celebrity and fame, but I'm pretty big in the community. I get a lot of haters, and I think a lot of it is, you know, the lack of what they can't do. And it's like, you'll just come on, and if you take time out of your day to post a comment, you know, Tommy Gunn 105 or whatever your account name is, you got nothing better to do. I took something which is fantasy football and made it a reality and made it a living, which is very hard to do. I took, you know, I didn't just break out of the 9 to 5. I did it doing fantasy fucking football, which is insane. And a lot of people are kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say, but maybe jealous of it. And I just kind of tune it out, and I kind of, you know, my family fuels me, my desire, the loss of my dad fuels me, but this kind of helps too. You know, it's like, I kind of want to say, fuck you guys, I made it, to the haters. And I've got a lot of great people there, but it's just a shame that they're looking at the guys like, oh, that guy's washed up. Yeah, they're not in their prime, but you know, it's just, this is what they've done. Everyone gets old, right? Gravity sucks. But I mean, you got to just respect the person for what they've done. They've hit a pinnacle in their sport, right? No matter what.
Right. And you think of it this way: they've earned the right to be able to step in there and do it for fun. They don't have to compete anymore. But if they want to go in there and do it for fun, It's not like they haven't been hit before. It's not like they haven't been hit a lot of times before. They're savvy enough and they understand enough to not get hit hard. And if they do, they'll go down. And it's what they've done. And so I don't think we need to be putting these kid gloves on fighters. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. So in a world of uncertainty, it's crazy times right now. We want to talk really quickly about lion mentality and mindset. Is there anything you could tell? Because I want to make this show kind of evergreen. People can go back and say, "Oh, those are the wise words of Ken Shamrock." You know, a year down the road, just listening to it, it's a kind of an evergreen show where they can just listen to mindset. Is there anything you can say to people to adapt the lion mentality? If you're fearful, how do you get over your fear? Is there any piece of advice coming from you? I don't think there's anyone better to ask. Maybe you can ask a Tyson. You can ask other guys that have the lion mentality. But what can you tell people that are fearful in life, in circumstances, or if they're afraid to get out of their 9 to 5, what can you tell them? How do you tell them to get over that fear and just go for it? Is there any words you can say to kind of give people some more confidence, I would say?
Well, first of all, I think that you got to have supporting cast around you. That's going to help, because once you get to that point where you start being afraid of things, most of the time it's because you've been fed things, or people around you have been feeding you certain things that causes you to be in some sort of bubble or fear of not being in the right place at the right time. And so therefore you keep yourself back from things that you think may be harmful. And which is crazy. And I think in the world today, we see a lot of people doing that because of what the media is putting out there, what they're saying. And the reality of it is it's not. It's just a way for them to do their job and to make their reports more exciting and more fearful. And by doing that, people watch closer. And so it's all basically a work. That's exactly what it is. Everybody's trying to do a job, and the media is doing a job to make you watch what they're doing. And the only way they do that is for you to be fearful that you're not getting enough information to be safe. And so therefore you have to tune into what they're saying all the time. And the way I say get out of that is stop watching, because the world will not come to an end and you won't die. So I say get away from all that stuff, turn your social media stuff off, turn your telephone off, and just get out and start looking for yourself. Get your own information. Go to hospitals, look around. I promise you, they ain't full. And go out into your other areas and look around and see what other people are doing. I promise you, we're not in a pandemic. So I think you got to educate yourself and don't be educated by others.
Right. And I don't know, this thing is so confusing when you talk about the pandemic, because you hear some people dying, but again, that's because maybe they're a little bit older, they got on a ventilator, they got, used to that.
But you hear people dying of the flu, man. Come on.
True. Yeah, it's a little bit out of control, I would think. And I think it's a way for the government to control us. That's just my opinion. People can take it for what it is. I am a little cautious, but I'm not overly cautious where, I'm limiting my behaviors and doing this and that. I try to, keep active, keep busy. It's just been crazy time.
You know what terrorist is?
Yes.
Okay, terrorist is when somebody comes out there and they have a terrorist threat. What is the concept behind a terrorist threat?
Cause malicious behavior and hurt somebody, right?
No. A terrorist threat.
Or a threat to create
a terrorist threat.
To create fear, right?
Is to create fear and have people stop doing what they normally would do in an everyday life. What's happening to us right now?
And that's the best way to control people. That's the best way to control people when you're in a fearful state. And, a lot of people are listening to the news. Now, I don't listen to the news, but I turned it on the other day with the wife. I'm like, let's just see what's going on here. I turn it on and it's just such bullshit. It's like, oh, world, the words they use, like soaring high records of this and that. And it's just like, when you really break it down, there's more deaths in car accidents, more deaths in the flu. There's more deaths at this and that. And again, they're going to do fact checker on this, but it's just like, I don't know all the facts, but I know there's more deaths than other things, but this has been kind of labeled like, where's the flu now? How come no one's talking about that right now?
And I mentioned this on my social media the other day where I said, it's funny how everything that is coming out of the news and the reports is that the numbers of the coronaviruses are going up. And I said, it bothers me. Not that I'm saying that there's anything to this, but I said it's a little bit confusing to me that I had two friends go in within the last 3 weeks that had the flu. They were treated with the flu and then released. Then when they got their information back,
Right.
found out that it was listed as COVID. They were never treated for COVID. They were asked all the questions and all the symptoms, and that some of them did line up, but then they were treated for the flu. And yet it was listed as a coronavirus. This is two friends of mine that was listed as the coronavirus. So what's happening? I don't know, but is it now that the flu and everything that we normally would see rising in the world today that we're not hearing about is the flu and different sicknesses that happen this time of year that are now being switched over into being coronaviruses. So therefore, all of the numbers are rising because they're being listed as symptoms.
Right.
Not that they have the coronavirus, but symptoms of the coronavirus. And then, of course, later on treated as a flu or a sickness, and they can go home. But because they had symptoms of this virus, it was listed and not changed as the coronavirus.
Now, we didn't plan this, but I'm hearing these stories all the time. But I have a similar story, and I might butcher the story. But my brother-in-law called me the other day. He says, I know a guy that shared a story with me through his doctor. He knew, anyway, they know this guy who basically was going through like a drive-through where they test you for, it was like a medical clinic, but you were driving through, you get tested, you drive off. Long story short, there's a part where they take your name down. Here's your name, your address. Okay, you're going to proceed forward to the next spot. They took his name, his number down. Before he got to the part where he's going to get tested, like, shit, I got to go. This is taking longer than I thought. Drove off. A day or two later, now the timeline might be off, he gets a call and says, you have coronavirus. You got to come back. He's like, how do I have the virus? He's like, I drove off. I never got to the point where I got tested. Are you kidding me right now? There's something wrong here, right?
Yeah,
the numbers are off.
And the thing is let's make it real clear here. It's not like we're saying there's no coronavirus. That's not what anybody's saying. What we're saying is that we are not being told the total truth about what's going on and the numbers and cases of the real people that have the coronavirus. That's the sad part. The ones that do have it, it's sad because then they're not going to get the necessary help that they need, because they're listing everybody under the coronavirus, and therefore they're all being sent home, where somebody could be seriously sick and they're going to treat them the same as they're doing everybody else and sending them home. And some of those people, which again, there's just stories, but I have heard that have died from other things because they weren't treated soon enough, because they were listed as coronavirus. They were then sent home to self-quarantine, then came back a month, 6 weeks later, and it was too far gone to be treated to help them when they could have been saved.
Last question. I won't hold you up too much longer, but do you miss the 90s? Because I'm kind of missing the 90s right now.
Yeah. I miss the music too.
You seem like, again, I was younger in the 80s. I don't really remember that much. I just remember playing my Nintendo, watching Hulk Hogan on TV. I grew up watching wrestling a lot, by the way. But like, do you just find that life was a little simpler, or do you find it's a little more complicated with the technology now?
Well, I think it's just a different lifestyle type thing. I guess if I was going to say something about when in 80s and 90s and now,
yeah,
I think the one thing that I have the problem with now is that I think that when it comes to the things that were from the time that we're in high school, maybe even middle school till college till out, it seems like that there's not a fair knowledge of what's being taught in our schools. It seems like our kids and everything are being taught things that normally would not be taught in schools, and that opinions of school teachers and college professors are being pushed onto our kids today. That sometimes our kids come home, and trust me, I've seen this many, many times over again, where the kid comes back from college and the parents are like, where did you learn this? Like, why are you saying that? And it's because these kids are now being, and not all of them, but are literally being fed things that are not part of their class structure. Right. It's an opinion of a college professor that's pushing these thoughts that has nothing to do with their class on these young kids, so that their thought process now is starting to change and literally fight their own family members over these thoughts.
That's a crazy time. It really is. And
back when we did it, I'm just talking about when 90s and 80s.
Yeah.
You didn't you went and you studied. You live and study for something, and you weren't coming home with all these different political thoughts and opinions.
I remember my high schoolers in the 90s. We used to take trash cans and smash them over each other's head and give each other.
Yeah.
It's true. I think you get in trouble for doing that right now. We do it for fun, and we do the stunner in the hallways. It was great.
Yeah, they probably put you guys in a mental hospital and start fooling you full of dope, saying there's something wrong with you.
By the way, who's your favorite wrestler? Did you like Hulk Hogan? Did you grow? Is he one of your favorite wrestlers? I don't know him personally, but he's the guy that I grew up watching. You know, I ate my vitamins and said my prayers. He was a guy that I grew up watching. Was he a guy that you got along with, and is a guy that you enjoyed watching?
Yeah, I've met him a few times, and he's a nice guy. I don't know him.
Okay.
But I didn't, like I said, my upbringing was a little bit different than everybody else. I was in and out juvenile hall. I didn't have a TV, so I didn't get to watch much. But when I was really young, probably at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I saw my first wrestling match, and it was Pat Patterson, Moondog, Maine. And there was blood everywhere. I mean, it just bleeding everywhere. And I thought they were killing each other because I was young and didn't know. But that was my first experience with wrestling. And then later on, I actually got involved with wrestling and didn't watch it that much. My dad did, and I got to see bits and pieces of guys like Lex Luger. My dad loved Lex Luger. He loved Hulk Hogan. You know, he loved Jesse the Body Ventura. You know, just different guys during that time. And so I would get glimpse of it, and I was like, man, those guys are pretty convincible. You know, it was interesting watching the storylines and how they built up. But I never really followed it because I was a wrestler. I played football. And so I understand the physicality of it. And some of the things that they did was just silly. And I didn't really understand how hard it was or the effort and how hard it was to be successful at it until I actually started doing it. And that's when I started to really understand that this wasn't the same thing that I watched on TV. This was much more difficult.
Right. And with all the wrestlers that have passed on, a lot of them to heart failure, my dad to heart failure, are you doing stuff right now? Because I care about you and I want to see you, you know, continue to leave the legacy on. What do you do to take measures to take care of your heart? And is that something you guys are monitoring now?
Yeah, and I can't get much into it now, but I'm actually part of one medical board now. And then I'm actually getting into business with some other people that literally focus on age management that help not just myself. I'm looking into being able to help different athletes, you know, reach out to people like Mark Coleman or Don Fry or any of these guys that were in my time to help them get back into a normal phase of life. And so I have that ability, if this thing happens, which it looks like we're moving in that direction, I'll be able to reach out and get these guys feeling good again and getting back to normal again, where their bodies are not going to just be left out to shut down, and put them on the right things to get their bodies aligned so that they start feeling good and they're feeling better and they're feeling good about themselves. So that's kind of my focus right now is I have the opportunity within the next year, probably less than that, to be able to reach out and really start focusing on helping these guys that were fighting in my time and even after my time.
Yeah, I'd like to keep in touch. If there's anything I can do to help people from suffering the same fate my dad did, because that's hard on a family to lose somebody suddenly like that without really saying goodbye. Cancer is probably a nightmare too, because that's more drawn out and painful. I haven't picked the poison. Right. That's even worse. But I think losing someone suddenly like that is extremely hard. It was hard on my system because you don't really get to say goodbye. But yeah, that's why you got to be good to people every day in your family and friends, because you never know, right? So,
well, I feel like we've all been put on this earth to try to be the best that we can be successful, work hard. And then there's a point in time after you achieve that accomplishment that we're all put here to turn around and help other people. I believe that 100%, that we are not just going to move up the ladder, be successful, and then die. No, we move up the ladder, we're going to be successful, and then we're going to turn around and help other people do the same.
Yeah, I see you're doing that. I think you're making a lot of difference in a lot of people's lives and through your podcast. So make sure you guys check it out. World's Most Dangerous Podcast. Ken Shamrock. I mean, this has been a little surreal to me. I don't even know what to say. I want to keep in touch and maybe have you on again as the show continues to grow, man. This was my 11-year-old, 12-year-old teenage self is like, really excited right now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, Ken, man, this was amazing. Thank you for being here, man. We appreciate it. Hopefully we get you on again. It means a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Perfect. I'm going to help you with your fantasy lineups now.